Alright, part 2 of the video. Since the last video, part 1, Dota 2 network went down and I couldn't get in the practice lobby, but now we got it all set up and ready to go. So I talked about how in the last video that that was a perfect world situation where your other support is kind of coordinating with you, getting items done or whatever. But I have a proposed solution for the problem, which is as a 5-position support to buy the courier plus entries and refuse to buy obs so that another person has to purchase them. So like worst case scenario, your mid or your carry buys it, but I think more likely than not your carry might buy your offlaner might buy one for himself, or the true thing that should happen is that the other support should buy it, which is only 150 gold. It shouldn't impact them too much, if at all, and actually they should be buying that for you. So I don't feel very much guilt about it. It's a little rough, but let's just talk about the build here. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna buy an animal courier, and we're gonna buy sentries, and we will not buy obs. So with this opening, I'm gonna pick up 1 tango and 1 clarity, and then here's where it gets kind of interesting. So you can go between the tango or the salve. This is purely situational, but as a guideline, I would say that if your other support pulls a tango, like let's say that somebody else pulls a tango and you have 3, then I would definitely go for the salve. But if you have to pull both, then I would just pick up another tango myself, and I'll just run out to the lane with my 2 sentries and my extra regen, and then they'll be like, "Where's the wards? Why didn't you get a ward?" Well, I pulled my mid can move out. The ward's not going to affect me in the bottom lane really, because I don't really need it. It's mostly going to affect the offlaner, but you should be able to say, hey, I bought everything, can you buy the wards? Or maybe they'll catch on, okay? So pretty much that's that. The clarity is also optional. You can pick up a branch depending on what your hero needs. And I understand that it sounds like a dick move, but I believe it's necessary to bring about change. You do not need observers to perform as a support at your role. The sentries are a big deal, and if you had to pick up the obs and you had to pick up the sentries because you need them, it'll be like too much for you to shoulder. You won't have enough regen for the lane, and oftentimes you won't be able to like de-ward their counter ward on your pull, or the ward on the side that like every time you inch towards them they back off. These kind of obvious plays that gives them a lot of confidence. So sentries play a relatively big factor in your immediate laning situation. Other players cannot expect you to perform your role with the abysmal resources available to you with the other build, and this is pretty much my call to action. It's to have players help each other more and be more informed about the subtle yet massively impactful things you can do to make your game better. And it's not just for your unsung support player, it's for everyone. And I can't stress this enough that everybody benefits from better lane control, dewarding your safe lane, being able to utilize the pull to pull the creep wave back, being able to deward so that their offlaner is unable to feel confident in his plays. These are all important things, and to have regen to zone, to give to your carry if he needs it, to even have your tango to eat the tree at the pull to pull through. Something as small as that, because many times you get in an engagement where you trade, you have to eat a tango wherever you are, and then you pull the wave, and you're unable to connect because you don't have tangos. This is why I like to buy a lot of tangos. Okay. Now that's out of the way, my original idea for the video was to explain this very common issue. We all know what it's like to have an offlaner get free levels. He gets a lot of gold, and eventually he pressures our safe lane into a snowballing frenzy. Why does this happen? A lot of it has to do with what I described earlier, with the supports not balancing each other out properly. But 2 other much more subtle reasons, which is why this happens, is because the initial creep wave plays a big factor, and also the lack of sentries. So just kind of backtracking a bit, let's say that in the first build that I picked up in part 1, that I didn't pick up sentries, and I got some more regen, I can zone the lane, but I didn't pick up the sentries. The fact of the matter is that you won't be able to know what the offlaner sees, and maybe you do, but you won't be able to counter it. And he'll have maybe countered your pull, and you're not going to be able to unable to utilize the pull and connect it, and that's a big deal for resetting the creep position. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So before we start into our next example, I'd like to refer you guys to my warding guide. It'll be in the description and most likely annotated somewhere here. The gist of it is that without watching that warding video, you'll pretty much do what I said. The sentries are required to pull to reset the lane creep position, and you'll be able to screw with the offlaner with the side lane wards. Eliminate it, Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to load up another game. This game is a game of Mike playing Clockwork in a pub, which I saw on his stream a couple hours ago, and it kind of inspired me to do this a little bit more because I feel pretty strongly about this type of thing. Let's get a real example here, and my Dota crashed again. I think it has something to do with the new patch or whatever, but it's kind of ridiculous to deal with. But anyway, let's just get into it. So the example I'm about to show you, if Dota 2 isn't down, okay, it's good. Whew. I should have it downloaded here. So pretty much Mike is offlane Clockwork, and he's versus a dual lane. This is what I remember seeing on stream. Give it a moment to load. Okay, let's skip ahead a bit. Alright. So, in this situation, Slark and Dazzle will probably be laning together versus Mike's Clock. And you see here that the Dazzle's already suffering. Look at his item build. His items are pretty terrible for dealing with his lane already. And if you notice here, this is what I'm going to talk about as well. Slark does a really good job of blocking the lane. This is the right thing to do. Later in the video I'll open up a C9 replay and demonstrate a proper block, but for now this is what you're going to get. Alright, back to the game. So, Undying swoops in, and he's about to plant a pull blocking ward, and this can and will happen near pubs, by the way. So here's the situation that you never want to find yourself in, where you don't have sentries, your pull is blocked, and coincidentally enough, I talked about this earlier, but there is a jungle bloodseeker who is ruining this lane, and I'll show you how. So
no use crying over spilled blood.
The jungle bloodseeker goes ahead and clears this camp, the first spawn, which which is a really big deal, because now that he's cleared this small camp here, the observer ward from the Undying is going to perpetually block this lane, and the ramification of that is that the Dazzle cannot reset the wave so that he can get a better position on the clock, and the lane stays here. Now you see, because the clock doesn't have, there's no way for them to reset the lane here. The clock gets 3 levels. He's level 3 right here, and this Slark almost dies. If he's level 3 at 2 minutes, which is pretty absurd. I mean, it happens a lot in pubs, but it's almost too fast, because he's the same level as the safe lane carry. And you can imagine there, if maybe something went a little bit better for Mike, or I think he did have the opportunity to kill the Slark, but that's not the point. If he did kill the Slark, you can imagine how badly this game would have snowballed, and you'd never want to put yourself in this position. Okay, so I think he's getting way too much XP, and he's getting way too much at this point in time, and that's what, you know, pubs, what happens in pubs all the time, and this is the main focus that I kind of wanted to have. This is the reason why I created the video in the first place. It bugs me. But this is basically all you need to know about my side. But, you know, offlaners in this position can take full advantage of the mistakes by getting quick levels to pressure, and with smart support rotations and lane matchups in their favor, like, let's say that he laned versus some melee hero or some range hero that was very squishy, like that couldn't escape his cogs, he might be able to just take over this game. But in this case, it's not as easy, and although it could have went either way if maybe that first blood went the other way, but he's getting a lot. He's getting too much, and there's no way for Dazzle to deal with this because there's a ward right here. Okay, so with that said, things can go horribly wrong, given the right chain of events. All right, so now let's go to the other side. Let's switch it up a bit. So look at the other team's offlaner bounty.
First blood.
Notice
folks.
that he's getting levels here when Undying isn't present. Undying even dies in the bottom lane here because he just happens to get picked off in the offlane. And this is what I'm talking about. You dual lane the offlane at the expense of your own safe lane. So now the bounty's like 2. He's harassing the Warlock back. Luckily the Warlock has sentries. You know, if he didn't have sentries, this would have been completely horrible for him, and the bounty would have got a lot more XP. But you can see what the Undying is doing here. He's not. I don't think he's doing this like consciously. He probably is doing this because he died in the offlane. But the effect of what he's doing is that, watch. Notice when the Undying is here, he can help zone this bounty hunter. So watch the bounty hunter's level. He's level 3 here. And watch what the Undying's doing. He's kind of chasing him out of lane. So if Undying didn't come back top, the bounty probably could have snowballed further and got more levels. However, with another support, and I'm not saying that Undying is the ideal support, but he's a support nonetheless. He frees up space for Warlock to, you know, get the rune to pull the wave here and further deny EXP from the bounty. So watch, he's still level 3. Okay, and although Undying doesn't stay for long, if you look, he'll rotate off the lane soon. But pay attention to bounty here, it's 3.5.
Dyer's mid tower could use a little help.
And Undying can be doing more here, but he kind of TP's bottom to help Mike. Although he leaves without staying for too long, it has a big impact on bounty's levels. So skipping ahead a bit, let's skip maybe like to 6 minutes and pause. Let's look at the bounty and compare. So the bounty is level 3, almost 4, granted that, but Mike is 5.5. He's almost 6 at 6 minutes. This is a really big deal, and it could have been a lot worse had the game changed a little bit. But yeah, you can see the effect of what I'm talking about. Having another support there really helps. Alright, moving on. Let's get into a game that demonstrates proper blocking. So I'm sure my Dota will crash again. I'm gonna wait it through this time though. Oh, nice, it worked. Okay, so the game we're gonna be looking at is a tournament game between C9 and VP, Game 3 of the finals of Dota Pit League.
Reserve.
This game we're gonna look at what C9 does to block their safe lane, and it's the proper way. So look, we all know the drill. Everyone goes for the bounties in the early game, but if you notice something
30
about
seconds
Envy,
to showtime.
smart. Once he knows that the rune is secured, there's no need for him to contest it. He runs back, just like that Sark, and he gets in position to block. He goes back towards the block, and you see that Misery positions himself here to catch the wave. You can catch it off here as well, but nonetheless he's catching the wave. This is a I'm gonna slow it down a bit. He catches the wave, Envy fails. This is a team effort, and it's worth mentioning that the Radiant creeps are a lot harder to block than the Dire, because they move much faster for a longer amount of time in the beginning. Regardless, it's important to make these plays. If VP wasn't running a Clockwork, this lane would be in a much different position, and a much better position for them, where the Skywrath could harass him, where Clock didn't feel as safe under his tower. But it's a Clockwork, and that's why Clock is a good offlaner. He can manipulate the waves in his favor. But
that's a first blood. Radiant's mid tower's getting banged up.
You'll notice that Misery pulls the first wave. He pulls it back immediately, and from that position he'll be able to do much more. The carry in the lane can choose to freeze it. You can freeze the lane by just CSing properly and keeping the lane exactly in front of the tower here. He can keep it like that forever long he wants. But if he screws up, the support can pull it back, and this is another reason why sentries are crucial, because resetting the lane is important for control. If the wave was sitting near Clock's tower, no amount of pressure could drive him out. So Clock does what Clocks do, and he resets it, but this is not an important detail. It's specific to his hero. The most important thing is how C9 blocked the lane, and how they showed you how you can get to a point where you can control the lane. Pretty much, you get a lot more options. The support can zone, he can pull the lane back, he can keep the Clockwork far back if he wanted to, but this is a matchup where Bloodseeker kind of can deal with Clock on his own, so he can push up like this. But in a pub situation, pulling the wave back and being able to control that space, control all the space compared to the space here next to the tower, makes a big difference for pushing the Clockwork out or whatever offlaner, because it's he just feels much more safe by his tower. He knows nothing's gonna happen. It makes a huge difference, and especially in pubs, as to how you control the offlaner. These two very subtle details of how your support can play, like how it can itemize, how they can work together to block the lane, makes a big difference. And I'm sorry I couldn't find a better replay to show you, but I assure you it's a big deal, and if you do it in practice, and if everybody starts to do it in the pubs, it'll really help out a lot. So sorry, I got kind of distracted a little bit. My ops messed up, and Dota 2 network kept going down, but yeah. This is kind of my fluff way of going on tangents and over explaining things, but I think it's important to think about, because there's almost no voice for supports in the scene, and these things can be game changing for the community. Thanks for watching, and please support me by sharing the video and checking out my social media links in the description, including my Twitch channel, which I stream on quite often these days. Take care. Fluff out.